This is page 204, grammar presentation. So this goes over the rules and the rules for the grammar, and then also the form that it takes. So for request, you notice we use you, not I. We use I for permission. Can I go to the bathroom, for example, is asking for permission. Can you give me the pen? That's a request. So that's one of the main differences that you will see. We use you when we make a request. When we have a modal verb like can, could, will, and would, we have to use base form. And just like what we studied before, these are ways that we can agree to the request. Sure, certainly, no problem, of course, I'd be glad to. And for negatives, when we want to refuse, we usually say, I'm sorry, but, and then we give an excuse. Or sometimes people say, I'm afraid I can't. That's just another way. Next, it says, would you mind? So this is another form that we can ask a question. So if you notice, we have mind. It's not just would. So in this case, I have to use gerund form, not base form. So make sure you understand how to use that. And then remember, just like last week when we have would you mind, we have to answer like the opposite way. So would you mind driving me to the doctor? Not at all. That means yes, I will drive you. So this is how we actually agree to the request. And then if we don't want to complete the request, we usually say, I'm sorry, but, and then we give an explanation. I'm sorry, but I'm busy right now. Or we can say, I'm afraid I can't. That's one way to answer. Now that you understand the grammar form, let's look at the rules here. We use the modals can, could, will, and would to make a request. So these are some examples you can read. Could and would are more polite than can and will. Use could and would to soften requests. So the past form, these are more polite. We can also put please, and just like we studied last week, we can put please at the end, or we can use it, we can put it in the middle right before the main verb and after the subject. Requests are much more common in conversation than in writing, but we can use requests in informal notes, emails, and text messages. So we use this a lot more in conversation. But sometimes we do use it in emails and messages to people. So these are some examples of that. On the next page, 205. There are several ways to respond to requests. In affirmative answers to requests, we usually use the expression sure, of course, certainly, I'd be glad to, and no problem. Would you shut the door, please? Sure, of course, or certainly. So we can say yes, I will, but most of the time we use one of these answers. I think it's easier. Certainly and I'd be glad to are more formal than other answers. No problem is the least formal. Dan, could you help me carry these books? I'd be glad to, Professor Chin. So he's talking to his professor, so he's being a little bit more formal. We're using I'd be glad to. Can you lend me your pen? No problem. This is least formal. He's probably talking to a classmate. So just understand the difference of when we should use each one. In negative answers, we usually apologize and give an explanation. So what we mentioned before, could you deliver this to Ron, please? I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm expecting a client. It's kind of rude to say, no, I can't. We always say, we apologize and give an explanation. Do not use would or could in response to polite request. So just like last week, could you give this to me? I'm sorry, I can't. We don't use would or could in the answers. We only use it in the question. And then the last one, would you mind? Again, we use gerund form afterwards, so ing. Would you mind making a copy of the report? This is more polite than could or would. Okay. Would you mind waiting? Mr. Carlos is in a meeting. not at all, or of course not. So this is the tricky part. When we answer this type of request with not at all, it means that we will do what the person requests. In negative answers, we apologize and give an explanation. So for example, if somebody says, would you mind waiting? I'm sorry, but I can't. That means I will not wait. I have another appointment in half an hour. So just understand the difference between using would you mind and would. And then this is pretty interesting on the bottom here. Since we use this a lot in conversation, please make note of pronunciation. It says pronunciation of could you, would you, will you, and can you. In informal conversation, we often pronounce could you, would you, and will you, and can you as could ya, would ya, will ya, and can ya. So instead of saying could you mail this for me, we'll say could you or could ya. Could ya mail this for me? Sure. Would you remind me later? Will you type this for me? Will you type this for me? No problem. Can you leave it on my desk? So this is just the way that we pronounce in speaking. So make sure that you understand that, so when you hear a native speaker use it, you know what it means.